I was pulling a lemon pound cake from the oven when my phone rang. It was still warm in my hands, the scent of sugar and citrus filling the kitchen, when I saw Jamal's name light up on the screen. I smiled. I figured he was calling to ask if I'd bring that potato salad his wife liked, or maybe to remind me not to spoil the grandkids with too many sweets. I wiped my hands on my apron and answered. His voice was soft. Too soft. "Hey, Ma, you busy?" "No more than usual. Cake just came out the oven." He paused. "Listen, I've been thinking. The house is kind of packed this weekend. Nia's folks flew in early and the kids are already bouncing off the walls. I just don't think we've got the space right now, you know." I didn't say anything. I didn't trust my voice. "I was thinking maybe you could stay with Miss Angie. She always said you were welcome any time." Miss Angie. My old coworker. Nearly blind now and living with her daughter 2 towns over. I hadn't seen her in years. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear like I hadn't heard right. "Your house is too small now?" "It's just this weekend, Ma. It's nothing personal." Nothing personal. I told him I'd think about it, then hung up and placed the cake gently on the counter. I stood there for a long time, the quiet wrapping around me like a cold towel. That pound cake sat untouched for 3 days. My name is Ruthine Baylor. I'm 72 years old, a retired school bus driver, and a mother to 1 son. I've lived most of my life thinking love meant sacrifice. That if you gave enough, time, money, prayers, pieces of yourself, you'd be taken care of in return. I was wrong. And this is the story of how I finally stopped confusing being needed with being wanted. I left at sunrise. I didn't tell Jamal I was still coming. I packed my overnight bag the night before, slid the pound cake into a deep container, and loaded the back seat with a few things he'd asked me to bring months ago: a box of his old textbooks, a quilt his grandmother made, and a shoebox of baby pictures I'd promised to sort through. The road south hadn't changed much in 30 years. The same rusted-out barn near the state line, the same gas station where I used to buy Jamal orange soda and licorice ropes after Sunday drives. I stopped there now, more out of habit than anything. The man behind the counter recognized me, or maybe he just sensed I wasn't in a hurry to get where I was going. It was a quiet drive, just me and the hum of tires against pavement. I kept thinking about the last time I visited Jamal's house, back when he was still getting settled. The furniture was sparse then, the walls bare. I helped paint the guest room myself, choosing a soft cream color because it caught the afternoon light so gently. He'd thanked me that day, pulled me into a hug, and said, "You're the only reason I have a home at all, Ma." Funny how short gratitude lasts when pride and comfort set in. I passed a sign for the town and felt my stomach clench, not in fear, not even anger. Just something low and tight, a knowing. I didn't have a plan, not really. I just knew I wasn't going to let shame keep me away from a house I helped build. When I finally turned onto Jamal's street, the neighborhood was buzzing. Kids on scooters, dogs barking behind fences, someone grilling in a backyard. His house stood near the corner, freshly painted with that wide porch I once dreamed of having myself. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the silver SUV parked beside me. New, sleek, probably belonged to Nia's parents. I sat for a moment, watching the movement through the front windows. Laughter floated out, high and bright. I looked down at the pound cake on the passenger seat. It had shifted slightly in its container, the icing sliding just a bit to one side. I straightened it, then got out. The porch light flicked on before I even made it to the steps. It was still early afternoon, but the sensor must have picked up my movement. Or maybe someone inside had turned it on when they saw my car pull in. Either way, it cast a yellow glow across the front boards, the same porch I'd sat on the first time Jamal brought Nia around. She was shy then, all quiet smiles and polite nods. Now she ran the house like it had always been hers. The front door opened before I could knock. Nia stood there, one hand on the frame, the other holding a towel. She blinked, surprised, and gave a tight smile. "Mrs. Baylor, we didn't think you were still coming." I stepped up, holding the cake with both hands. "Well, here I am." She hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Come on in." Inside, the house was loud with life. The kids were in the living room chasing each other with foam swords. Music played softly from a speaker in the kitchen. The scent of garlic and roast chicken hung in the air, warm and familiar. For a moment, it almost felt like it used to. Then I looked down the hallway and saw the guest room door open. A suitcase rested near the foot of the bed. On the dresser, 2 glasses of sweet tea sat half full beside a tablet, still glowing with a paused crossword puzzle. Nia's mother appeared in the doorway, stretching her arms overhead and calling out, "I'll be ready to eat in a bit. Just need a quick shower first." She spotted me and smiled. "Oh, Jamal didn't say you were coming after all." I forced a smile back. "He didn't say I wasn't." Nia cleared her throat, stepping past me to take the cake. "Let me put this in the kitchen. It smells wonderful." I followed her slowly, taking in all the little changes. New curtains, a second recliner, a wall of family photos that did not include a single picture of me. Jamal came in from the back patio just as I was setting my purse down on the edge of the couch. He looked surprised, maybe even a little guilty. "Ma, you made it." "I did." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't think. I figured after our call." "You figured I'd find somewhere else to be," I said, my voice low and even. But I was already on the road. He nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. "We've just got a full house, that's all." I looked toward the hallway again. "Yes, I can see that." No one said anything for a moment. Then Nia chirped from the kitchen, "You hungry, Mrs. Baylor? We've got plenty." Plenty of food, maybe, but not a single space left in a house I helped make possible. Not even a corner. I looked around one more time, then told her gently, "I think I'll just take a plate to go." They packed the plate carefully. Nia added a piece of chicken, some rice, and a scoop of green beans, all tucked neatly under a square of foil. She handed it to me with both hands, like it was some kind of peace offering. I thanked her, then stood in the middle of the kitchen with nowhere to go. No one offered me a seat. No one asked where I'd sleep. Jamal glanced at the clock on the microwave. "It's still early. Want me to call Miss Angie and see if she's home?" I looked at him for a long moment. He wouldn't meet my eyes, just kept fiddling with his phone, pretending to be helpful. "No need," I said, wrapping my coat tighter around my shoulders. "I'll find my own place." Outside, the sun had started to dip low behind the houses. The street had quieted. Children were being called inside. Porch lights clicked on one by one. I walked back to my car, the food still warm in my hands, and sat in the driver's seat with the engine off. I didn't cry. I just stared straight ahead, thinking of all the ways I'd shown up for him over the years. I thought about the winter he caught pneumonia in college, and I drove 5 hours with a pot of chicken soup on the passenger seat, stopping every 30 minutes to make sure it stayed warm. I thought about the time his car broke down right before a job interview, and I took a payday loan to cover the repairs. I thought about that guest room, the one I'd painted, furnished, and filled with extra linens I bought on sale. I turned the key and backed out of the driveway slowly. No one waved. No one came outside. I passed a small roadside motel a few blocks down, the kind with chipped paint and flickering vacancy signs. I pulled in without thinking. The woman at the front desk barely looked up as she slid the key across the counter. Room 108, ground floor, facing the parking lot. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old air. I set the food down on the desk, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked around. Beige walls, floral bedspread, a single lamp with a crooked shade. I exhaled, slow and steady, then reached for the remote. I didn't turn it on, I just needed something to hold. That night, I ate half the meal cold and wrapped the rest for breakfast. I folded my coat over the chair and sat on the bed in silence, my thoughts looping back to that hallway, to that guest room, to the way no one looked surprised to see me standing on the porch without a place to stay. Not hurt, not even angry, just not surprised. The morning came early, the way it always does when you haven't really slept. I lay still for a long while, watching the light creep in through the thin curtains. The heater clicked on and off, the hum filling the quiet. I sat up slowly, my back stiff from the too soft mattress, and reached for the cold plate of food I hadn't finished the night before. The chicken had gone dry, but I ate it anyway. It sat heavy in my stomach. I washed it down with lukewarm water from the tap, then folded the foil neatly and slid it into the small trash can by the door. As I rinsed my hands in the sink, I caught my reflection in the mirror above it. My eyes looked tired, older than usual. Something in my face had changed overnight, though I couldn't say what. Maybe it was just the way realization settles on you after the sting wears off. I dried my hands and sat at the desk. The morning traffic passed by just beyond the window, muted and distant. I pulled out my wallet, then reached into the side pocket of my purse where I kept the old envelope from the bank, the one with the loan documents I'd held onto for years, just in case. It was habit, more than intention, but once the papers were spread out in front of me, I couldn't look away. There it was, plain as ever. My name, my signature, right beside Jamal's. I remembered that day so clearly. He'd called me from the bank, voice full of hope and nerves, saying the loan officer needed a co-signer to approve the final paperwork. I hadn't hesitated. Drove straight there in my work uniform, ink still on my hands from the attendance sheets I'd been filling out that morning. I remembered the way he looked afterward, keys in hand, full of pride. "You'll always have a room here, Ma," he'd said. Always. I stared at that signature until it blurred, then reached for my phone. The number for the bank was printed at the top of the letterhead. I tapped it slowly, deliberately, and pressed the phone to my ear. A woman answered. Polite. Professional. I told her my name, gave her the address, confirmed the mortgage account number, then I asked her what I needed to do to remove myself from the loan. Her tone shifted. Not unfriendly, just more careful. "I'm sorry, ma'am, are you saying you want to release liability?" "Yes," I said. "That's exactly what I'm saying." She walked me through the process. It would take time. There would be forms, signatures, reviews. Jamal would need to refinance on his own or find another cosigner. But it could be done. When I hung up, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace, not yet, but the first trace of it. Like a door had been opened, just a crack, letting in a breath of fresh air I didn't realize I'd needed. I folded the papers carefully and slid them back into my purse. Then I stood up, smoothed the bedspread, and decided it was time to pay one last visit to that house. Not to stay, not to argue, just to take back what still belonged to me. It felt strange walking up to that porch again, the same one I'd stood on just a day before, only now I wasn't carrying cake or expectations. This time, I came with purpose. The sun was high and the street was quiet. Jamal's car was gone, and for that I was grateful. I didn't want a scene. I wasn't looking to make anyone feel small. I just needed my things. Nia opened the door with a look that told me she wasn't expecting me back so soon. She shifted her weight, one hand gripping the doorframe. "I just need to grab a few boxes from the attic," I said, calm and clear. "The dining set, too, the one Nathan built." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "He's not here," she said as I passed. "I know." The air inside the house was warm and smelled faintly of cinnamon and lemon, probably my cake, now half-eaten and sitting on the counter, surrounded by dirty forks and crumpled napkins. I didn't look too long. I just kept walking toward the narrow staircase that led up to the attic. The stairs creaked the same way they always had. I remembered Jamal laughing about it when he was little, pretending each step had a voice. I pushed the memory aside and opened the attic door. It was dim and stuffy up there. Dust clung to the boxes like skin. I found what I was looking for easily. 3 boxes marked in my handwriting, photo albums, my mother's china wrapped in old towels, a quilt I'd been stitching before arthritis stiffened my fingers, and the dining set, covered in a tarp, the edges of its carved legs just visible beneath. Nathan had built that table when Jamal was 10. Every scratch on it had a story. Every chair still held the shape of someone we loved. I carried the boxes down one at a time. Nia stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching. She didn't offer help, but she didn't stop me either. When I reached the last one, I paused. "I'll send someone for the table," I said. "It's too heavy for me to manage alone." She nodded once, her lips pressed tight. "Jamal's not going to like this." I looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't cruel, just comfortable. Comfortable with me staying quiet. Comfortable with me staying small. "He doesn't have to," I said, not unkindly. It wasn't his to begin with. I walked out without waiting for her to respond, my arms full of what little I had left in that house. Outside, the wind had picked up slightly, carrying the scent of cut grass and something sweet in bloom. I placed the boxes in the trunk one by one, then stood there a moment with the lid still open. So much had changed inside that house. But out here, in the sun, I felt something familiar, like myself. I closed the trunk, got in the car, and pulled away. I didn't check the rearview mirror, not once. Back at the motel, I laid the boxes gently on the bed and opened the one on top. Inside were the photo albums, worn and thick with memories. I flipped through one at random. There was Jamal at 3, grinning in overalls with juice on his chin. Another page showed Nathan sanding the dining table in the backyard, sleeves rolled up, wood shavings in his hair. Each photo felt like a small tug backward into a life that had once felt whole. But that wasn't why I had opened the box. I found the envelope I needed, the one from the bank, and placed it on the desk. Then I took out a pen and began filling in the forms the loan officer had emailed me that morning. The language was dense, but I read every line carefully, releasing co-liability, removing my name, acknowledging the shift in responsibility. Each signature came easier than the last. Not because I was eager, but because the act itself felt clean, like wiping a fogged mirror. I wasn't erasing love or the history that had come before. I was just drawing a line where none had been before, a boundary. When I finished, I took the forms to the front desk and asked if they had a printer. The clerk handed me an envelope and gave me directions to a print shop a few blocks away. I made the drive with the windows down, letting the wind thread through my fingers. I mailed everything certified, keeping the receipt in my purse like a badge. It wasn't just the mortgage. It was the mental tally. The list I'd never dared to speak aloud, the car I'd co-signed in college that never got paid off, the groceries I'd delivered when he was between jobs, never asking to be repaid, the checks I wrote for summer camps, dentist appointments, and that last-minute tuxedo rental when he was best man in a wedding. None of it had ever been about money. It was about love. But when love is used like currency, it leaves you bankrupt in ways that don't show up on paper. That night, I sat on the bed with my boxes and called a moving service. I gave them the address, told them to expect a small dining set and one determined woman watching from the sidewalk. They laughed politely and booked me for the next day. Then I turned off the light and lay back, listening to the hum of passing cars. Outside, life went on. Inside, something had shifted. Not broken, just quietly, firmly rebalanced. The movers were polite and efficient. 2 young men, strong and full of jokes, arrived just after 9 with a flatbed truck and padded blankets. I gave them the address, followed them in my car, and parked a little down the block while they unloaded the equipment. I hadn't called Jamal. I didn't think it was necessary. I'd said what I came to say. The rest could be silence. Nia opened the door when they knocked. She looked startled for a moment, then nodded and stepped aside without asking questions. Maybe she'd seen the way I carried myself the day before. Maybe she knew the difference between a mother trying to prove something and a woman who had nothing left to explain. I waited outside by the mailbox, watching as the movers wrapped each piece of the dining set with careful hands. They took the table apart gently, sliding the legs out and protecting the edges with thick cloth. One of them came out to ask if I wanted the chairs as well. I nodded. All 6. Nathan had carved initials into the bottoms of each one, small and unseen, unless you knew where to look. I'd run my fingers across those letters more times than I could count, especially after he passed. They loaded the set last, securing it with wide straps before closing the truck's back door. It wasn't much, not in the eyes of someone counting money or measuring square footage, but it was everything I had left that still felt like home. As they climbed into the cab, one of them tipped his hat to me. "We'll take good care of it, ma'am. Delivery's scheduled for tomorrow, right?" "Yes," I said. "Tomorrow's just fine." I stood there as they drove off, watching the truck disappear around the bend. The street was quiet, same as always. A wind moved through the trees, shaking a few early leaves loose. I could hear someone's sprinkler ticking in a nearby yard. It was a peaceful sound, but it didn't pull me in. That house no longer held any part of me. Back in the car, I glanced once at the rearview mirror, but not for the house. I looked at my own eyes, steady and clear. Then I drove back to the motel with the windows cracked open and the air warm against my skin. There was nothing left to pick up, nothing left behind. What mattered now was what I'd taken back. The call came just after dinner time. I was sitting on the motel bed, folding laundry from a small load I'd run at the corner laundromat. My phone buzzed once, then again. Jamal's name lit up the screen. I let it ring to voicemail, then it rang again. On the third try, I answered. "Ma," he said, his voice tight with something between confusion and anger. "What's going on? Naya said you came and took the dining table, and the movers said you scheduled the delivery to your place?" I paused, smoothing the towel in my lap. "That table belonged to your father. He built it with his own hands. It was never meant to stay in a place where his name wasn't remembered." There was a silence on the other end, but it wasn't empty. I could hear him breathing, could feel the words forming. "I don't understand why you're doing this. Why now?" he asked, his tone growing sharper. "I told you the house was full. It's not like we meant to hurt you." "But you did," I said softly. "You hurt me by deciding there wasn't room, not just in your house, but in your plans. And I didn't say anything at the time because I wanted to believe it wasn't deliberate. I wanted to give you space to do right." His voice cracked slightly. "This isn't fair." "No," I said, steady now. "What isn't fair is asking someone to keep giving while pretending they're invisible. You wanted my help when you needed a cosigner, when you needed college tuition, when you needed someone to step in. And I gave it. Freely. But respect should have come with that. And space. Not just the physical kind." I heard a chair creak on his end like he'd sat down hard. "You're pulling out of the mortgage too? What am I supposed to do now?" "You'll figure it out. Just like I did," I replied. "You have resources. You have 2 parents in your home now, remember?" His sigh was long and uneven. "I didn't mean to make you feel unwelcome." "But you did," I said, not with anger, but with certainty. "And that feeling doesn't disappear just because you didn't mean it." He didn't speak after that. I waited a few seconds, then said, "I hope you're happy, Jamal. Truly. But I won't chase a place in your life that you've clearly reserved for others." Then I ended the call. My hand shook slightly as I placed the phone back on the nightstand, but only for a moment. The quiet that followed was different this time. It didn't ache. It cleared, like air after a long storm. I checked out of the motel early the next morning. The front desk clerk offered a lukewarm smile as she handed me the receipt, and I returned it with a polite nod. I loaded the last of my things into the trunk, 3 boxes, a coat, and the leftover pound cake, now slightly dry at the edges. The dining set would be delivered later that day to my new apartment in Richmond, a 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a quiet brick building, just 2 blocks from the library. Before heading back, I made one stop. The community center sat on a quiet corner not far from where I used to run my morning route. The sign out front was faded, but the parking lot was full. Inside, it smelled like floor polish and crayons, and the front office buzzed with the chatter of young mothers juggling strollers and forms. I asked to speak with the program director. A woman named Carla greeted me with a firm handshake and bright eyes. She offered me a seat in her small office and asked how she could help. I told her about the scholarship idea. Nothing large. Just a small fund to help single mothers go back to school or pay for childcare while they pursued a GED. I had been thinking about it for a while, but never seriously. Now, it felt not only right, but urgent. Carla listened without interruption, then asked a few thoughtful questions. She scribbled notes and nodded along as I explained my intention to invest the money I once saved for Jamal's future into someone else's beginning. By the end of our conversation, the foundation was set. She thanked me with both hands clasped around mine and said, "You're going to change someone's life." "I hope so," I replied, because I finally realized I need to stop pouring into a well that's run dry. She didn't ask for details. She didn't have to. On my way out, I passed a young mother sitting on a bench near the entrance. Her baby slept against her chest, wrapped in a sun-bleached blanket. She looked up as I passed, and I offered her a gentle smile. She nodded, the kind of quiet, tired gratitude I'd seen on my own face many times before. I walked back to my car with a lightness I hadn't felt in years, not just from giving, but from giving without being drained, from choosing where my love went, rather than letting it be taken without care. I had always thought dignity was about suffering in silence. Now I understood it was also about choosing where to plant what little you have left, so that it might finally grow. The apartment was modest, just the right size for one person who had learned the value of enough. The living room had a single armchair, a bookshelf I brought from storage, and a small table just big enough for a teapot and a book. The dining set arrived as promised, and I placed it by the window where the light poured in every morning. I left one chair pulled out, the way Nathan always did, as if expecting someone to sit beside him. The library was a short walk away. On my first visit, the librarian, a soft-spoken woman with gray streaks in her bun, helped me find the volunteer coordinator. They signed me up for a literacy program that paired retirees with adult learners. My first student was a young man named Marcus, who wanted to pass his GED so he could apply for a city maintenance job. He was quiet at first, all sideways glances and apologies for getting things wrong. I told him I had all the patience in the world and meant it. Afternoons settled into a rhythm. I'd walk to the market, pick up fruit, maybe a jar of peach preserves if they were on sale. In the evenings, I'd sit by the window with my knitting, half-finished projects in my lap, and a soft old radio humming gospel or jazz in the background. Sometimes I'd hear children laughing in the courtyard below, their voices rising like music. I never felt lonely. There was a peace in the stillness I hadn't known I needed. One day I received a letter from the bank confirming that my name had been formally removed from Jamal's mortgage. I placed it in a drawer with other important papers and didn't think about it again. He hadn't called since our last conversation. Neither had Nia. I stopped checking my phone for missed calls. There were none. Holidays came and went. I made my own plans, simple ones. A new book, a walk by the river, sometimes a quiet dinner with one of the other women in my building who'd also learned that family is not always the one you're born into. One morning I stood at the window watching the sun move across the dining table. Dust danced in the light. The wood glowed softly, polished and worn in all the right places. I traced my finger along its edge and thought about all the meals shared, the arguments had, the birthdays sung over that table. It had held so much. Now it held quiet, and for once, that felt like enough. This new life hadn't been planned. It had been claimed, not loudly, not with anger, but with the quiet firmness of someone who finally understood the difference between sacrifice and surrender. I didn't need more than what I had. What I had was mine. Thanksgiving came with a soft chill in the air and the smell of wood smoke drifting through open windows in the hallway. The neighbors downstairs had company. Laughter rose through the floorboards, and the faint clatter of cutlery against plates echoed between the walls. I set my own table quietly. One plate, a cloth napkin, a cup of tea, and opposite me an empty chair pulled back just slightly, the way Nathan used to leave his before sitting down. I hadn't received an invitation from Jamal. I hadn't expected one. In truth, I didn't want one. The weight of being somewhere out of duty rather than warmth had worn thin. I no longer saw the point in forcing joy in a room that had once made room for me and then decided not to. I made a small meal. Roasted vegetables, sweet potatoes with just a touch of cinnamon, and a chicken thigh seasoned the way Nathan liked. I used the good china, the set passed down from my mother, and poured myself a glass of cider. I placed a photo of Nathan on the table beside the salt, not as a gesture of grief, but of memory. He would have liked this quiet, this soft kind of peace. As I ate, I thought about past Thanksgivings, the ones where I cooked for 15 people, cleaning as I went because no one else would. The years when Jamal brought friends, co-workers, even Nia before they were engaged. And I made space for everyone. I remembered the year I had the flu but still managed to bake 3 pies because he said dessert was his favorite part. I'd smiled through the headache and the body aches, proud of how full the house was, never once thinking about how empty I felt afterward. Now the silence was not absence. It was intention. Each bite was taken slowly, each sip of cider held with gratitude. I did not mourn the missing faces. I honored the ones that had truly stayed, the ones etched in memory and framed on shelves. I thought about the young mothers at the center, the boy I tutored who had passed his reading test last week. I thought about how many Thanksgivings they would go on to have, fuller and brighter than mine, because someone had made room for them when it mattered. After dinner, I washed the dishes by hand, humming softly to myself. I dried each piece with care, returned everything to its place, then lit a candle in the window and sat for a while, watching the sky darken. No calls came, no knocks at the door. But I did not feel forgotten. I felt full. There were things I still wanted to say, but not out loud. So I wrote letters. Not to be mailed, not to stir up more hurt, but simply to let the weight of unspoken words move through me. I bought a stack of simple stationery and a new pen from the corner store. Late at night, after the world had quieted, I sat by the window and wrote. The first was to Jamal. I didn't accuse him or list the ways he'd disappointed me. I just told him who I had been, what it had taken to raise him alone, and how proud I had once been of the man he was becoming. I told him I had wanted more for him than to become someone who made room only when it was convenient. I admitted that I had made mistakes too, mistakes born of love that didn't know when to stop giving. I folded the letter, pressed it flat, and slipped it into an envelope without sealing it. The next letter was to Nathan. I hadn't written to him since the week after he died, when grief made my hands tremble and my words come out in pieces. This time the letter was steady. I told him about the apartment, the scholarship fund, the dining table now bathed in morning light. I told him I had learned, finally, to be alone without feeling empty. I wished he could have seen it all, not just the part where we struggled and made ends meet, but the calm that had come after. That above everything would have made him smile. The final letter was to myself. I wrote slowly, unsure at first what one says to a version of themselves they had ignored for so long. I started with an apology for all the years I had asked her to shrink, for the nights I'd told her that love meant staying quiet. I thanked her, too, for surviving, for believing, for stepping away when staying any longer would have cost her the rest of what she had. I placed each envelope in a small wooden box, the one that used to hold recipe cards and family photos. It sat now at the back of the closet, not forgotten, just resting. Writing those letters didn't change anything outwardly. The phone still didn't ring. The mailbox still held only catalogs and bills. But something had shifted again, not in the world around me, but in the way I stood inside it. I was no longer holding my breath, waiting for someone to make things right. I had given myself what I needed: a voice, a record, a quiet kind of truth. The seasons turned slowly, one into the next. The branches outside my window, bare and reaching in winter, softened with buds in spring and swayed green in the warm summer wind. I kept to my rhythm. Mornings at the library, afternoons at the community center, evenings with a book or a pot of tea and my knitting. No drama, no dread. Just a life that belonged to me. One evening I walked home under a sky tinted lavender and gold. The sidewalks were still warm beneath my shoes. Up ahead, a mother crouched beside her child, steadying the little girl as she wobbled on a training bike. The girl pedaled hard, arms stiff, teeth clenched in concentration. She went just a few feet before tipping to one side, but she didn't cry. She looked up at her mother, who smiled wide and clapped her hands. I paused at the corner and watched them for a moment. The little girl climbed back on. The mother held the seat loosely this time, her hand there but not pressing, just present. I thought about how many years I had held things too tightly, how I had mistaken grip for care. Letting go, I had learned, is its own kind of love. The kind that trusts someone to find their own balance, even if it means they fall. At home, I opened the windows and let the evening air move through the rooms. I lit a candle on the table Nathan built, the soft glow flickering against the wood grain he had smoothed by hand. I sat beside it, not needing conversation or company, just a moment to be still and remember how far I had come. Freedom hadn't arrived with a dramatic exit or a triumphant declaration. It had come quietly, in a motel room with old papers and tired eyes, in a small scholarship fund, in handwritten letters tucked away, in the decision to stop knocking on a door that no longer opened. Now each day unfolded without fear of being displaced or discarded. I had a place that didn't shrink to fit others, a life that expanded gently around me. I had earned every bit of it, not through perfection or patience, but through the hard, quiet work of reclaiming myself. And that, I realized, was more than enough.